We have some community events, but the Sangha is our power. So Ty says that emotions are like a storm, and what we really need to do is prepare for them. And he says a practitioner knows how to nurture himself or herself. A practitioner knows how to create joy. A practitioner knows what to do and does it, because a practitioner has insight. Because if we hang around with our brothers and sisters, if we keep our mind quiet enough, then insight will come. And so it almost is unnecessary for me to give a talk about how to rise above negativity or what to do with it or how to handle it, because we already have those answers. Those answers are at the tip of our breath, they're at our fingertips in every moment. But yet coming together, we have to have something to talk about. So I'm going to talk about the topic, and in the flavor of practitioners being able to create joy, I'd like to pump that one a little bit, and that is with the idea of silliness. A lot of you know that I have a silly streak in me, because I think that silliness is humor is something that's so helpful. If we do not have any silliness in our lives, I believe that we're doomed to drown in our seriousness. And so I have a song, and I'm going to invite us to sing this song together. Remember, it's silly. If you've got an aversion to silliness, then try to breathe through it. I'm giving you a great breath. It's 2 breaths in and a breath out. And it's like, okay, we're going to put up with the Maverick because she always wants to do something a little bit different. You know, normally we don't sing in Sangha. Normally we get a lot of information, but tonight this is the way your Sangha sister does it. And when we sing, it will probably be best if everyone is on mute, even though I'm going to ask us to sing together, because what happens if anybody is off mute and they're singing, then it takes the voices get all switched around and it gets a little garbled. So let me see if I can share here so that we can do this. Here we go. All right, so you probably know, everybody's got to know Jingle Bells. And if you don't, then just, you can listen. But I would suggest that you sing, because there's just so many benefits to singing. And of course, this is silly as it can be, but just sing along with me. A day or two ago, I thought I lost my way, but then my ego disappeared and I began to play. I heard my happy thoughts and felt a great big smile. And then my ego jumped back out and acted sort of wild. Oh, ego thoughts, ego thoughts, ego ain't the way to have fun in a safe, healed mind that does not want delay. Oh, ego thoughts, ego thoughts, ego ain't the way to have fun in a safe, healed mind that does not want delay. Playing with my friends on this most important day, I feel my courage jump right in, and I just want to say, I love you very much and hope you'll always know that I'll love you no matter what, through wind and rain and snow. Just happy thoughts, happy thoughts, happy all the way. I make choices with my mind in a very helpful way. Just happy thoughts, happy thoughts, happy every day. I make choices with my mind in a very helpful way. Yay. And it is, the Course in Miracles says simplicity is difficult for twisted minds. And so it's very, sometimes we get very upset about things in our lives that we already know what to do. I mean, we already got this list, this whole bag of tricks and things that we can do. We just already know what to do with it. Ty says, this is really interesting. He says that emotions are like storms. And we have to prepare for our storm. And one of the practices he gives, he says, if you are upset, and the reason that being upset is when we ask the question, how do I rise above the negativity? What it means is I'm upset. I don't want to feel upset. I want to feel something else. So we're going to go with that vein just a little bit. And he says, the first thing we have to know is that we're upset. It's kind of like, I'm upset, because a lot of times we don't acknowledge that we're upset. What we do is we try to cover up that. We try to eat over it. We try to buy over it. We try to watch TV over it. But he says, just stop and say, I'm upset. And then this is the kicker. He says, lie down or sit down and belly breathe. Let's try that. You know, it just does feel good to belly breathe, where you just breathe into the bottom of your belly and then breathe out and then breathe in again. And he says, he says, after an hour or two, you probably won't be upset. And I'm thinking, when people get upset, they don't want to sit around for an hour and do a breathe. No, they want a 3-minute quick fix, so that if something comes up, it's like, okay, I'm out of here. But he says, you know, lie down, because what is going to happen when we lie down? We are going to experience those emotions moving through our energy bodies. That's a slam dunk. He's really saying, lie down in these and see what happens when you're present. And he says, eventually they're going to disappear. He said, emotions are going to come and go. We can sit there and breathe just with the awareness that emotions are going to come and go, that everything is impermanent, that the perceptions that we have that are freaking us out, they're going to come and go. We don't have to get married to the thoughts we have that are upsetting us, but we can acknowledge them and know that we have them. And then the other thing is this idea that we need to get out. That's a problematic experience. We just can't get out. When I was about in my 20s, my husband and I, ex-husband and I, went to Martinique, and an orangutan jumped on me. And we were in the rainforest, and actually we weren't near any kind of medical facilities except for some very quaint medical facilities. But this orangutan jumped on me, and his fingernail went in my gut. It was a very long fingernail. And so it was like having a knife wound. And I had been a very good girl, and I could not understand how this could possibly happen to me. I had had a recent kind of enlightenment experience. I had tried to meld that into my Christian religion, and what it came up with pretty much was just trying to be a goody-goody. And this happens, and it was like, wait a minute, this didn't happen to me. I'm really good. It was kind of, I'm looking up the time. Have you made a mistake? Am I the one that, you know, how could this happen? And then when I was 33, I was robbed at gunpoint. 2 men robbed me, and it turned out to be a very complicated situation. I had a large sum of money on it that was not mine. I had to pay it back. It was a terrible situation for me. I was already under so much financial stress. And by this time in my life, I had discovered the law of attraction. So what I was going to do was I was going to control this. I went into therapy. I want to get rid of my feelings, deal with all of that. I had PTSD. But I wanted to figure out what thoughts I had that created this and how I could create so that this never happened again. I mean, I worked really hard and trying to control this idea that nothing bad was going to happen to me. It was exhausting. I mean, it was like putting something on top of the stress that I had recovering from the robbery, which I was thrown down. I had scars and scabs and so forth. So I'm trying to recover from this. I'm trying to make it not happen again. And at the time I was studying the Course in Miracles, and I opened it up to a section on the resurrection. And it said, you focus on the resurrection, you're focusing on the crucifixion, not on the resurrection. And I kept reading, and it says, the problem you're having basically is your body identification. You will not be able to protect your body from harm in this life. But who you are, who you truly are, can never be harmed. And that was such a relief for me because I had been moving around doing everything I could to avoid my body being hurt. And of course, we want to be smart. I mean, we're not going to go in harm's way, but things will happen that we have no control over. And so I don't know what we call these negative things, but they sure are uncomfortable. They're more difficult to deal with. But it was a process of moving from that. It wasn't a feel good, fix it thing. It was months before I untangled all the drama of that and I was able to get out of it. I will say that in this question, which I'll keep asking the question, and that is how to mentally rise above the constant negativity. I don't really like the word negativity. That word's never been a great word for me. And it's not that I'm negative about the word negative, or maybe I am, but it's the polarity of negative and positive have so many shadow parts in our culture. So many unhealthy things are attached with these two words, I think. And negativity, for example, what I found is that people that are the opposite of that, they say, I'm a very positive person. It seems like when I'm around these people, they seem to be very not so positive. They seem to be the ones that are suffering. And the negativity, also the word, it has a lot of judgment in it. It's like, that's a negative person, or isn't that negative? And so it's almost like the word itself. If I didn't even have a story to go with that, it's almost the word itself pulls me in a direction that that I don't think could lead to peace, even though, strangely enough, I could ask myself, how do I deal with the oppression that goes on in life today, both internally in myself and then the things that I see outside of the world? You know, how do I deal with these things? And the question is, how do I mentally rise above these things? If you listen to Ty, he will talk about the heart. He will say, when he tells us to breathe, and he gave us the breathing exercise about breathe deeply in the belly for maybe an hour or two, and you're probably going to feel okay. He says that when we breathe like that we bring this from our head into our bodies. And when we tend to have this disconnect between the head and the body, and when we do, then there's no way we can heal it, because we can't heal anything from here up. Everything, it has to be a whole healing when we heal. What we've done is that I can see 3 stages in consciousness. First, many years ago, we were given advice on moral codes. We had the 10 commandments, we had the paramitas, we had those things that are telling us how we can operate in kind of a right and wrong code. And then we moved into a different kind of awareness, and that was that we found self-help. We moved into probably thing that may have started that out was positive thinking. I'm fascinated about how positive thinking really got started. And it started because of the Hermetic teachings. And those were Trismegistus, who was a, let's see, Greek/Egyptian, I guess Greek teacher, but we don't know it. That was really a teacher that existed like that. But he had this body of teachings. And the teachings went down to this person, William Ackerman. And William Ackerman wrote a book called The Kabbalion. And then the Kabbalion, one of the students was Florence Scovel Shinn. She became a teacher of these principles, these Hermetic principles, but her student was Norman Vincent Peale. And so what he did was he brought some of these ancient Hermetic laws into the common narrative of her culture. And we began to find out that if we had positive thoughts, and we could really heal ourselves in many different ways. But it doesn't work all the time. Positive thinking doesn't work. It has a shadow side, because it can only work when we've made up the suffering. But it certainly doesn't address genuine suffering, and it doesn't address when we're triggered and we have to get over our emotions, but it does have its place and its space. So we got into this self-help stuff, but then what happened is that we got very narcissistic. And I can remember getting very ill, I mean, like irritated about that, because I got really tired of hearing somebody talk about their feelings over and over and over and over again. It's like, life is not a therapy session, but when we got into this conversation about helping ourselves, it's like life became the format for us to constantly heal ourselves. And then we began to move into something that this shift, and the shift that we're in happening now is where we have moved away from positive thinking. Not moved away, it's that we have embraced everything that was before is embraced, but now we've moved into the embodiment of the teachings, the embodiment of consciousness, so that we are not so in on ourselves. And it's the embodiment that really creates this safe space for us to be able to deal with everything. It's like a tree in the storm, and you can see the limbs are blowing back and forth, but the trunk is steady, and the leaves and the limbs are like our consciousness, our belief. They're about how we interface with the world. And the trunk is this really solid part of ourselves that we continue to open up to, that we expose to ourselves, to our world. We do this through the practice. I used to have a teacher that would come and stay with me, and he did practices for 2 hours a day. And I thought, who in the world has 2 hours a day to do practices? But then I began to see the effects in his life. And I said, I would like to have a life in which I could practice for 2 hours a day. So it moved from this idea of practice being a burden to practice being a privilege. Strangely enough, studies show that mindful meditation changes areas in our brain, like the amygdala, part of the amygdala that holds fear and anger and irritation, that part of the brain begins to change. And when it does change, it gives us the ability through the structure of our brain to be able to have compassion and peace. You know, when we sit in judgment, we think, why is that person being so da, 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 da? It's like, it's very possible that without the practice, that their brain is habituated to certain states of irritation and anger that they really can't get out of. And so it's not that they're really mean people, it's just that their lives are structured in a way that they cannot get out of it. I thought about this word transcend, because it's like, well, can we deal with the struggle and strains of life and the negativity and so forth by transcending it? And it's like, well, there is a way that we can do that, because there are two kinds of transcendence. One is the kind of transcendent where we try to skip over what's going on, or we try to avoid the negativity. But there's another kind of transcendence that means that we more identify with who we are, and we don't identify with our emotions. We don't identify even with our physical pain. And so we can transcend it, but it's not by way of detour around something, but it's really full thrust through what we consider the oppressiveness and negativity. In my life, I've found that there are some things that I'm to grieve and some things I'm not to grieve. There are calamities happening around the world, and I'm not really touched by them, and other ones I am. I think that there's an inner protectiveness that allows us to know which things we should allow to move us, and work with those and deal with those and grieve those and face those. I developed something for me to help to keep in check what my emotions are. And I'm talking about emotions because really we're not talking about what's outside. How do I deal with what's outside? We're talking about how do I deal with the emotions that are caused because of the way that I'm perceiving what is outside. And so that is when I get up in the morning, I like to take a look at my energy body and I feel my belly. It's like, well, what's going on in my belly? Is that hurt? Or what's going on in my solar plexus? Can I feel what's going on there? Or what's going on in my heart chakra? And for the most part, for me, this is where it's the heart chakra where I have the most problem. And so that is the area of my body that I feed the most in consciousness, feeding with loving thoughts, with maybe the Heart Sutra, the idea of love and peace and harmony and laughter, moving those energies through my heart. Because that's what Ty is talking about. He talks about we have to nurture ourselves. We don't wait until the events present themselves, but we nurture ourselves. And of course, when they do present themselves, then what do we do? Well, one thing he says, if we stay really present for 1 or 2 hours, they're probably going to go away, which you can't, I don't think you can get any better than that. You're probably familiar with Byron Katie's work. And I read a page where she was talking about this woman whose husband died and how she was able to move through that without suffering and without sorrow. And I thought, well, that's really great because as you get older, I kept thinking, when my husband dies, then that would be great if I could move through it without a lot of sorrow and I wouldn't have to be torn up all the time. And then my best friend dropped dead. And her daughter calls up. I mean, it was unexpected. It was someone I saw very frequently. And she had gone home for Thanksgiving. And her daughters called and said, she's had an aortic aneurysm. We're rushing her to the hospital. And later I called and said, well, how is she? And they said, she didn't make it. I literally fell on the floor, fell with grief. And it was like, okay, this was a really great idea that I could not experience that, but there was no way around it. The only way that we rise above negativity is by deeply experiencing it. I do believe that when we share the burden, that it helps lift. To speak to a confidant or friend, or even to be in this group, even if we don't say the word, we are supported in whatever we're going through. And I don't think that we can really gut it out by ourselves. When we're in pain, I think that we're made. As a matter of fact, if you look at the way cells divide and the way things survived at a very microscopic level, they had this altruism that created this intelligence that moved them to work together so that they could survive. And not one little cell or one little piece would have ever survived by themselves. So we have to unlearn things about this ragged individualism. It just doesn't work. It can work in some points. We want self-esteem. We want to rise up from our limited viewpoints. But if we really want to move into our power and into our splendor, we're going to do it together. We're going to do it together. Now, I'm not sure whether I really addressed this so much or gave you lots and lots of things to any tips of the trade, because I don't think there really are major tips that I can give. But my main message is that we have to go through what we're going through, that we have to build a stamina of equanimity. Oh, there's these wonderful teachings, and I love them. They're called the Dojin teachings, or Buddhist teachings, the Dojin teachings. And what they're about is they are about developing balance. And because when we develop this balance, then we can withstand the storms that life provides us. And so at this point, I'd like to open it up for a little bit of discussion for each one of you to share if you would like. And just reminding you that when we share, it's not crosstalk. We don't ask and answer questions, but we share from our heart what it is that has helped us with the practice, or maybe what has helped you in this particular with this particular question is that how do I move beyond the oppressiveness that I experience internally or externally, or maybe with specific examples. And so we're now open up for sharing.